Well, while America has spent today talking about a sissy slap on national TV last night, there is still a war going on in Europe, in Ukraine, I should say. Gas is still $4.25 a gallon, and Joe Biden came back from a disastrous trip to Europe and announced his budget today. Seems like a good time to bring on Congressman Guy Reschenthaler from the 14th District. Congressman, thanks for coming on again. Appreciate it.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on, and as always, just call me Guy, please.
Okay, I will do that. I appreciate that. If you don't mind, please call me Mr. Steigerwald. No, I'm just kidding. Let's start with the big guy's trip to Europe. Did he do anything to make things better in Ukraine in his trip over there?
No, quite the opposite, John. He actually made things worse because here's why. The gaffe or the misstatement, whatever you want to call it, about regime change in Russia with Putin, what that does is it gives Putin ammunition for propaganda. He can turn around to the oligarchs and say, see, I told you, the West is coming after us. They want to dismantle Russia. So it plays into his hand. The sad part is that Biden talks tough, but he doesn't take tough policy. And remember, a lot of the mess we're seeing in Europe started under Obama and Biden before. That's when they did nothing to stop Russia from moving in and taking Crimea. That's when they did nothing when Russia got aggressive with Georgia. And that acquiescence, that weakness has led to Putin being more aggressive. So what Biden needs to do is he needs to go back to the days of Teddy Roosevelt, walk softly and carry a big stick. Because what Joe Biden is doing now is he's screaming at the Russians, but he refuses to use the big stick. He's not even holding anything. We should be getting those MiG-29s to the Ukrainians like 2 weeks ago. We should be getting them more javelins, more stingers. We should be jamming their communications through electronic warfare. We should be doing all of that. What we shouldn't be doing is acquiescing to the aggression, yet talking tough.
What about the argument that what you just said there is an escalation and that it would make more sense or be a better tack to work harder at getting them to get into some negotiations, the Russians and the Ukrainians?
The escalation, I refuse to say what we do is an escalation because the Russians escalated this by invading Ukraine. Yeah. That is the red line that they crossed. That's totally unacceptable to invade a democratic state, another democracy, free market capitalist system, and just start taking pieces of its territory over. That is what we've seen. That's what we saw in the late 1930s. So as far as what we can do, the escalation that's very dangerous is the escalation of rhetoric from Biden. What we really need to be doing is we need to be thwarting the Russian advance through electronic warfare, through supplying more war materials, small arms, body armor, whatever, to get Ukrainians in a position to repel the Russians. Now, what I fear that the West, because we're leaderless, is going to sell Ukraine down the river and allow the Russians to keep Crimea, keep the eastern part of Ukraine, and just slowly chop away that nation, again, demand neutrality from Ukraine. The irony of all that is that it will just invite more aggression from Russia later. It will also, not putting Ukraine in NATO in the first place led to this, because had NATO accepted Ukraine into the membership, Russia wouldn't attack. So it would just lead to more aggression from the Russians.
You mentioned what Joe Biden said about this guy can't stay in power. He's been a walking gaffe machine since before he was elected. But that's more than a gaffe. He's doing this now on the world stage as President of the United States and leader of the free world, supposedly. You actually, at least I actually heard, and I think I heard some Republicans tossing around the possibility of the 25th Amendment if this guy keeps it up, because it's one thing to have a gaffe that everybody can laugh about on cable news at night, but it's quite another to say things that could actually result in thousands or hundreds of thousands of people being dead.
Right. Well, so here's the thing. Elections have consequences. If you elect a clown, you expect a circus. And that's what we have right now. Because people that thought that they didn't want to vote for President Trump because he had some mean tweets, well, congratulations, because you now have chaos on the world stage. You have Biden making these gaffes that are helping Putin. You've got Putin invading Ukraine. You have us abandoning Afghanistan, the Chinese Communist Party flying over Taiwan. And that's not to mention the disaster we have domestically with the southern border, inflation, an energy crisis, an upcoming food shortage. So again, I hope all that was worth it because now we don't have mean tweets. Had we just elected the adult that was President Trump, we would not have the chaos abroad or at home. Unfortunately, we now have Joe Biden, and you've got to think at some point the Democrats should be the ones asking for a change to see if they can run somebody else in 2024 or what have you. But here's another point about the 25th Amendment. I met with President Trump numerous times. That man knew what he was doing. He was competent. He was on the ball. No issues. And I'm a political science guy. I'm a lawyer, but I can tell you that President Trump was with it. And then you had psychologists and psychiatrists without meeting him, writing letters saying he's incompetent. We need the 25th Amendment. Where are those same psychologists and psychiatrists now? Where's the ones that were saying that Trump wasn't fit for office, yet they're silent on Joe Biden? That shows you the hypocrisy of the left and of the media for treating Biden with kid gloves while he's leading the world, the free world, to decline.
He also, well, first of all, they tried to walk back the Putin comments. I don't know if that worked with CNN and MSNBC and probably ABC and CBS and the Washington Post and the New York Times. I don't even know if it did. I haven't seen what their comments were about them walking it back. But does it work with people like Putin and people who are waiting on the words of a president of the United States before they take action one way or another?
Well, no, Putin doesn't take Biden seriously. If Putin took Biden seriously from the first place, he wouldn't have invaded. Remember, during 4 years of Trump, Putin never made an encroachment. It was during Obama and Biden that Putin was really aggressive. So I don't think Putin is listening to Biden trying to determine his next move. I don't think he takes Biden seriously. I also don't think he takes anybody in the West seriously. Right now, Zelensky is the de facto leader of the free world because he's the only one that's standing up to the aggression. Remember, the United States and the Brits, and I believe the Canadians, we had treaty obligations to defend Ukraine because Ukraine in the late 90s gave up their nuclear weapons, and we said we would defend them if Russia invaded. Well, they gave up their nuclear weapons, and now where's the United States? Where are the Brits? Where are the Canadians? We're nowhere to be found. So Putin knows that we're weak. Our allies know that we're weak. So look, Joe Biden, these gaffes fuel Putin because he can now turn around and use them for propaganda.
And, of course, there's also the gaffe of saying that sanctions were never meant to be a deterrent. And he said
right.
Not only that, but he said he never said it, and or that his administration never said it. And it took about 5 minutes for at least for the non-CNN, MSNBC people to find video of not only Biden saying it, but everybody from Jen Psaki down to other people in the administration, including, I believe, the Secretary of State, saying that's the exact reason why you have sanctions as a deterrent. So which is it? And can they walk that back and get away with it?
Well, look, the mainstream media, the legacy media, can help. They're basically the media arm of the Democratic National Campaign Committee. So the mainstream media will allow them to walk it back. But that's the reason why that legacy media is dying, and more people are turning to talk radio like this show, online sources, Fox, for example, Newsmax. And remember, Joe Rogan's podcast gets more downloads per day than the highest-rated CNN show. That's how much the legacy media has lost, and largely because they constantly are carrying the water for the liberals and the left. But as far as Joe Biden, can he walk this back? He can certainly try, but we have him recorded. Jen Psaki, Jake Sullivan, all of them were talking about sanctions. We needed it to deter, and of course it didn't deter. They also are the ones that said that Ukraine would fall within 3 days. Ukraine is still fighting on a month later. They were wrong about that. They were also wrong about Afghanistan. They were wrong when they told us that inflation was transitory. They're constantly wrong because they say what will pull good at the time. They don't care about accuracy or the truth. And the American people are finding this out. That's why Joe Biden's approval ratings are incredibly low. No one's talking about that. He has some of the lowest approval ratings in modern history of a president at this time in his presidency, Zero coverage from the legacy media on those numbers.
I'm going down the checklist. We're talking to Congressman Guy Reschenthaler from the 14th District. As long as I'm on these gaffes, how about his comments to the troops about how they're going to find out how bad it is in Ukraine when they get there? He's trying to walk that one back, too.
He is. So I honestly think that was just a gaffe, but it goes to the fact that he's just not competent. If you watch that video and the parts of it, he is rambling, he's mumbling. It's frankly sad that this is the leader of the free world, a man that's supposed to be in a position to be the leader of the free world, and he's struggling to talk to U.S. troops. And when he does, he's basically just talking in these platitudes. And then, of course, he gets caught in these things suggesting that the United States is going to go into Ukraine. No one is suggesting there's going to be American boots on the ground in Ukraine. Again, it just goes back to his competency.
We're also, speaking of national security, the headline at the Federalist today says, quote, Hunter Biden's laptops are now an active national security threat. The major networks have not mentioned yet that the laptop is verified. They haven't mentioned it, and but it's out there, and everybody knows now that it is true, that the laptop exists, that it's not Russian disinformation. Is Joe Biden compromised, and what can the Republicans do about this laptop now that it's out there? I mean, it was out there a long time ago, but everybody's accepting it now.
So, Joe, I've got so many points on this, because remember, I was shadow banned by big tech because I shared the New York Post story talking about Hunter Biden's laptop, which, so this is very personal because I got shadow banned for articulating this story, which turns out to be true. Additionally, remember the Intel community officers, all the leaders in Intel, who wrote a letter saying this laptop is Russian disinformation and is a ploy by the Russians. That shows you how bad our Intel community is when you have all those people that signed that letter heading into the 2020 election, where these are apparently the people that know what's going on and gathering the intel, and they got this wrong. So what can we do about it? Well, one, we need to retake the House. We can have oversight and investigation, and Hunter Biden should be the centerpiece of all our investigations regarding the Biden family, because that man has ties to the Communist Chinese Party, Russian oligarchs, of course, to Burisma in Ukraine, et cetera. But this laptop is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the corruption of Hunter Biden. And again, the Bidens are treated with kid gloves. Had this been Donald Jr., had this been Eric Trump, this would be wall-to-wall media coverage, whether it was true or not. But now we have the mainstream media and big tech and the DNC bury the story, shadow ban members of Congress like myself who tried to share this story, and it turned out to be true. Yet the shadow ban hasn't been lifted on me. There's been no apology. And remember, the people that have issues with the 2020 election, the issue with the 2020 election was the suppression of the Hunter Biden story. Rasmussen polling shows that had more Democrats known about that story, that Trump would have won the election. So when people complain about the election, that is the focus. It's how big tech and the DNC and the legacy media work hand in glove to suppress this story.
So President Biden came out today with his new budget proposal, and we're talking to Congressman Guy Reschenthaler from the 14th District. As usual, Guy, there's lots of talks about taxing the rich. I keep looking when the Democrats come out with these things, budgets, and you never see anything about cutting spending. It's always about where we're going to find more money and then how we're going to spend that more money when we get it. Anything different here?
Well, so there is a lot. If you look at the budget that just came out compared to the budget last year, it shows that Joe Biden has quickly pivoted. He's trying to move center right. But don't believe it for a second. This budget is illusory. It's smoke and mirrors. It's not. There's no substance here. It's basically a messaging tool. And look, those billionaires know full well that the Democrats aren't going to tax them because they are Democrats. These are the billionaires are the liberal progressives that are pushing this far left agenda. The big tech oligarchs they're all rabid leftists. So the Democrat Party isn't going to turn around and tax their supporters. It's just not going to happen. And even if they do, the billionaires are just going to move to places like Ireland that has much better tax rates. But I digress. Look, there's only one way to increase revenue into the Treasury, And it's you have to grow the GDP. That's the only way you increase revenue. And there's only two ways to increase GDP. It all goes back to Art Laffer. You either cut taxes, or you reduce regulation, or you do a combination of the above two, where you reduce taxes and you reduce the regulatory burden. That grows the economy, that expands the GDP, and that brings more money into the revenue, or into the treasury. You cannot tax your way into prosperity because it retracts the GDP, it retracts the economy.
And what about the effect of raising the corporate income tax from 25 to 28%? Who's going to pay for that? Me?
Well, look, that would put us at a higher tax rate than communist China, I believe. I mean, we would be one of the highest corporate income taxes. And what does that do? It drives more of our manufacturing offshore. We already are reliant on communist China for pharmaceuticals, for rare earth elements. COVID made this blatantly obvious that we were so weak on our supply chains. So it just takes more businesses and pushes them offshore. And at the end of the day, who pays that corporate income tax? It's not the corporations. That is shared. That is the burden is shifted to the consumer. So everything you buy will cost that much more when you raise that corporate income tax. But again, the corporations were the ones that went woke and are still woke, and now the Democrats are turning around and taxing them. So I can't exactly sit here and cry over it, but it is horrible fiscal policy, which will have many unintended consequences, which will actually damage our ability to reshore a lot of our businesses.
I only have 30 seconds left with Congressman Guy Reschenthaler from the 14th District. I have to ask you before you go, was the slap real or staged?
You know what? These guys are literally a bunch of clowns. Hollywood, these actors, they exist for our entertainment.
Yep.
I could not care less. Hollywood produces garbage, a bunch of garbage individuals that like to lecture us from their mansions in their Teslas. So I'm going to operate in the real world back in Western Pennsylvania. They can have Hollyweird all they want because at the end of the day, these people are clowns. They exist to entertain us, and that's about the extent that I care about them.
Very good. Thank you, Guy, and hope to have you on again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Take care.
Okay, that's Congressman Guy Reschenthaler from the 14th District. We'll be right back.